Now to the ongoing fight against COVID-19. Georgia is seeing a slight increase in COVID-19 cases with more than 1,200 new cases Friday. Right now, our weekly average is around 950. Also, our test positivity rate still stands around 6%. The WHO recommends 5% or lower for reopening. Georgia has more than 1,200 COVID patients in its hospitals as well. Despite some fluctuations, the number of people battling the virus in hospitals has remained steady for nearly 1 month now. But sadly, 33 more Georgians have succumbed. They have died from the virus since yesterday. Our state losing an average of 22 lives a day right now. And as we see some of the COVID numbers climbing instead of declining, the state of Georgia deciding to shut down mass vaccination sites at the end of the month when their contract expires. That's the end of May. 11 Alive's Neima Abdulahi joining us live now with the latest on what this means for folks who still need access to the vaccinations. Neima?
That's right. In just 7 days, 8 mass vaccination sites throughout the state of Georgia are set to expire, and 11 Alive is learning that those contracts will not be renewed. Take a look at this map. These are the specific locations of the 8 sites from Fulton County, Habersham County, Columbus, Savannah, Macon, and several other locations. The sites, which are run by GEMA and Homeland Security, were initially part of the major statewide push to ramp up access to vaccinations. Just to clarify, mass vaccination sites run by the local health department or by FEMA will continue to operate, like the Mercedes-Benz Stadium vaccination site. The Mercedes-Benz Stadium now does not require appointments. People can just walk up since the demand for appointments started to decrease.
I think it's a different interest. We're going to keep seeing changes as we go along with this. The folks that were really hungry to get that vaccine initially took all those appointments. Then we're seeing to that next segment of the population that's just like, I want to just be a spontaneous consumer.
And we're also learning that 1 out of every 4 people are vaccinated. And on the other end, as far as Georgia is concerned, in comparison to other states, there aren't that many people vaccinated when you compare it to other states. So we'll see exactly what this does when the mass vaccination sites start to shut down. Will the demand continue to decrease? That's something that will be evaluated in the next coming weeks.
All right, we will keep our eyes on that story. Thanks so much, Naeem.